Welcome to Season 2 of Fintechs A podcast by the one and only policy shop for Canada's fintech scene. I'm Alex, and I'll be your host. Join me as I talk to the people who are making a big difference in the lives of Canadians. Today, we're talking to Sue Britton. From the early days of fintech in Canada to now, Sue's seen it all. She's a fintech innovator, she's been in the space for years, and she's now a Chief Innovation Officer at Beam Credit Union. Okay. Sue, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited to talk to you for a number of reasons, but one is that I've seen so many. I've been in this long enough now where I've seen both ideas and people come and go. But you've always been here. I feel like you and fintech go hand in hand. How did that happen?
Gosh. It's funny, like I heard the term fintech in like 2013 because at the time I was in a corporate job and our CEO thought we were, a fintech, and we were actually strategically trying to position ourselves as a fintech, and we were like a $2 billion company, right? Like at that point, people were talking about fintechs, in the same breath as they were talking about startups. And so I knew what it was, but then when I left corporate, and again, I was in a corporate innovation role, and I thought, I also thought I knew the whole, like the landscape, right? Because a lot of corporate people sit there and do their research on Google or maybe go to a couple of events and think they know everything. But when I was faced with trying to figure out what did I want to do with my, first time entrepreneurial career, I just started to just go out and learn and realize that, fintech was so like huge and there were so many interesting things going on. So I guess I kind of had a bit of an advantage when that was back at the end of 2015, and that I had some perspective on what the power of fintech was. But that's how it got started. And then I just became a little bit of a, you couldn't, sort of satisfy my appetite for learning because there was just so much to see and learn in the Canadian ecosystem. And so I guess I just was like, wow, this is really cool.
One question I often get when I'm doing my day job here in Ottawa, especially when I'm telling people who our members is what exactly is fintech? Because you guys seem to have banks in your membership, you guys have card networks in your membership, you have startups in your membership, securities dealers. What does the word fintech even mean? Like, what class of companies or what universe of companies does it even refer to?
I almost feel like it's more of a behavior than it is a thing, like a company, because it's helpful for us in the industry to think of fintechs as these new entrants who, or new products from maybe old entrants, but, these new ways of doing things that maybe historically you had to walk into your bank branch or, physically do something. And fintech kind of almost came with this wave of, technology innovation. But I think it's more of a behavior. It's like, I don't know, fintech represents to me the elimination of all the friction that we experience in, I guess both a digital and, personal or human experience, but it's the fix to the bad experience. Yeah.
Is it a perhaps this is an extreme way of putting it, but is it a culture of techno utopianism? Like technology is going to solve all the problems before us?
No, I don't think so at all. I think there's some really practical, boring use cases for fintech. Like, I'm working for a new credit union, and we have so much need to automate process that, which is the other thing that's just been such a huge eye-opener, along with moving to BC and actually not being in a super huge urban center, and actually like seeing and understanding the difference between, rural or suburban or, urban. Like, it's also like people don't know what technology can enable. And so they, if something's manual, if you've always done something in a certain way, unless it's introduced to you, fintech can make, a 25-step process one step. So no, I don't think it's utopian. I think it's, but I do think that, like at some point we'll need, we won't see the need to keep sort of the term, as relevant. It'll become just like, maybe a new way of talking about banks and credit unions.
I'm curious about how one can innovate at an institution that's big and been around for a long time. You've worked at a couple yourself, as you suggested when you were in corporate. In my imagination, places like this are more set in their ways because over time, ways of doing things emerge and become ingrained, if not outright codified in processes and things like that. Checks and balances emerge, I guess is what I'm saying, to keep people from taking the whole system down by accident. It's great at managing existential risk, but maybe not so good for innovation. So how do you do it?
Oh my gosh. Well, our chief risk officer at Beam Credit Union is probably one of the biggest innovation cheerleaders out there. I think there's a bunch of, I mean, I never thought I would be in this position where I'm actually working for a credit union, and I, still have my business and stuff, but like the humbling that I've been going through, just actually really understanding that a lot of the way things are is because people just don't know. And, I like in my last 10 years as an entrepreneur, sort of as fintech grew, I grew, but like coming from that environment into a credit union, it's like, you would think everybody would at least have a basic knowledge by now. They don't, because it's what you're exposed to. So I think the biggest thing is like, first of all, I don't think companies don't innovate deliberately. Like, I think they don't innovate, or they don't know, but because they either don't know how, they don't know that they should, they don't know what to do. And so in our organization, because we've, over the last couple of years, and I've only been there since January, so I'm kind of coming in at the tail end of it, but there's been, so many, I don't know, I think it's 8 credit unions have merged over time. And this last 2 is 2 equally sized credit unions truly merging, as opposed to, even though we use the term merger in the credit union space, most of them are acquisitions, right? Like a bigger credit union, merging with a smaller one, but the smaller one takes what the bigger one has. For us, we've got this like incredibly talented and brave and, sort of innovative thinker in our CEO. And he's really like helping to bring the organization along. And the mindset is, why do we do that? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? How can we do it better? Is there a way somebody else can do it for us? So I think my short answer would have been leadership. Like, it really does take the knowledge and a clear direction and leadership to really change an organization.
I want to keep pulling on this string of innovation, but before we do, since we've mentioned credit unions and Beam a few times, let's quickly go over that. Who's Beam and what do you do there?
Yeah, so Beam Credit Union is a provincial credit union located in BC. We are the second largest credit union in BC, and I think the 9th largest credit union in Canada, with just over 10 billion in assets. And let's say 170,000 members, which in the credit union space is big. And Beam Credit Union is our new brand and our new name for the merger of Gulf and Fraser, which was primarily a Lower Mainland, Greater Vancouver-based credit union, and Interior Savings Credit Union, which is, an Interior BC. So we have a pretty awesome geographical reach, and with a whole new strategy. We're just starting to roll out a new brand, and really what we want, what we're aspiring to be is, the best people first and digital first financial institution in British Columbians and in British Columbia for British Columbians. And, it's a bit of a unique, sort of vision for a lot of focus right now with some of the other credit unions has been in going federal. We have a lot of market to opportunity to go after, and we're really going to be hyper focused on that. And so my role, I'm Chief Innovation Officer, I am only here for a period of time, although I think I'll have an ongoing relationship with Beam, but my role was to come in and set up what we call our business innovation function, which is strategy, marketing, product, the practice of innovation, and then an agile way of working. And then, so that's the team that I have. It's, a mighty small team, but we're the engine of change, I guess, for the organization.
Should all companies have a chief innovation officer and a business innovation function?
Well, I think having a very clear and specific strategy, and when I say strategy, I don't mean what you put in your annual report or what you put on a slide, but actually really like knowing your members, your channels, connecting your strategy to that, to your products, to. I think, what's fortunate about what we've built, and we're just beginning, is, it helps to sort of make it very clear where we're going, and then the organization is there to support that. So, I think it takes a leadership mindset to do that, though, because, even in our organization, like having a real true product management function is brand new. It's new for the industry, really. Like beyond a title, like it's having a product strategy and being really clear on, what's the best product that we need to offer to compete against software and tech companies and the big banks. And so that's just one. And then the practice of innovation is like it's really the practitioners or people that are helping to show people how to do things differently, right? How to start with, what problem are we trying to solve for the member? Not, hey, we need to drive more deposits for our organization. Yeah.
So this is a question I could ask anyone, I think, who isn't a Big Five bank. But why aren't more Canadians ditching Big Five banks and becoming members of credit unions instead?
Well, I almost kind of got to put my Sue hat on, not my Beam hat on. But I think I would say this to my colleagues at Beam too. Like, the thing the banks got right, I think, is they really understood that they needed to deal with their digital experience. And so, I think there's still room to improve, but by and large, it's pretty decent to use, your banking, mobile, or online. They haven't innovated the product. Some of them are innovating in the way that they're packaging, like, the RBC. And, if you're a physician with a small office and an incorporated business, you're pretty well taken care of by RBC. And so I think what they got right is, so far is they've invested in making those digital experiences, comparable to what we all have come to use with like the Amazons and Googles and, all of our apps on our phone. That's what they've got right so far. You haven't asked me what they've got wrong.
We can get there. So what's true then about the Canadians who use credit unions that isn't true of the people who don't?
Well, gosh, I still feel like I'm learning that. Because there's part of me that feels like there's too much emphasis on, the credit union, cooperative values and things like that. Like, I think what should be true is that I'm going to a credit union because I think they can serve my needs better than a big bank, because with a big bank, they don't even know who I am and they don't care. Like, the reality is, if you've got 10 million customers, you're never going to look after me, and my specific needs in a way that's truly, like putting me first. And I think that's the difference. But what credit unions, I think, historically there's a bunch of things about the credit union system. And I hate this term, because when you're in the space, system gets to be a really comfortable way to almost like compare yourself, right? So my system competitors, what they're doing, and the reality is, like, they're not our competitors, even though we do compete with provincial credit unions in BC. But it's like a credit union should be about, in the communities that they're in, uniquely serving the needs of those customers. And, the fact that we are not here to make a profit. And so, yeah, our members are the ones that technically are our owners. That is more about the difference between, at a bank, everything is about the share price, right? The almighty share price, and shareholders, seeing value and continuing to own bank shares. Whereas with members, it's really not that at all. That might be functionally like the same type of thing, but no, I think there's a lot to be determined about what is a credit union in the next 10 years versus what it has been for the last 100 years. But it should really be about serving people in their communities in a way that is specific to what their needs are.
All right. So, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding, but credit unions have vibes. They have an incentive, a better incentive structure. But what the big banks have done really well is figure out their tech and the user experience part of that in particular. Yeah. I'll use this as an opportunity to say, what did big banks get wrong?
Well, I think by their very nature, they're big. And, I'm quite sure the people in the front line, whatever that front line is, have a good feeling of what their customer issues are. A lot of it will have to do with product, right? Like, this product doesn't meet my needs, but I don't have any other choice. Or, I have to pay X interest rate, which right now, for all those homeowners out there who have mortgages renewing, is, pretty dramatic increase probably. And you don't feel like you have any other choice. And it's actually a really bad experience. Like, that takes the digital experience and sort of deprioritizes it, especially for, those bigger choices you're making in your life that, where if your mortgage is renewing this year and you have double your interest rate, like, that payment is eating into vacation money. It's eating into, holiday money, or maybe even your kids' education. And so it hurts a lot more. I think the reality is banks can't really deal with the specific needs of their customers, right? It's like, here's my product, and my product is what it is. And we're going to tell you if you can buy it. I think that's the thing they're still getting wrong, because, if we did have a competitive landscape in Canada, I mean, I think things would be drastically different, because, there is I get the complacency about moving now too. Like, I get, I'm one of those people that's always been with my own personal and business banking, and been with the same big bank, and even moving to my own credit union is hard. But it's mostly a technology issue. And so that friction is what makes you complacent. But if you knew that there were competitive alternatives, I think you'd go in a heartbeat.
It's been said once or twice to me that Canada's cooperative sector, the credit union sector, is not in fact very cooperative. True or false?
Well, I mean, you just look at the way we're set up. We're cooperative in that we all use we all use system providers that are that have been created to support us. So that's cooperative. I have a couple of people that I've met in the last few months. One at Prospera and one at Innovation Credit Union, and we have calls all the time, and we talk about, hey, how do you do wires? How do you do this? How do you do that? And we're all sharing, all our information. So, which is super helpful. And it's actually, it's not that we necessarily will all do the same thing, but the sharing is 100% there. Like, there's not, how, like, I had a friend who worked really high up at Bell, and as she was kind of going through her career, climbing the ladder, I think her final role was like president. I would listen to her talk about the intense competition between Rogers and Bell, and just the, as soon as somebody does something, the next one does it, and it's like, there's none of that. There's none of that in the credit union space. Like, I think it's not for, I think the problem is that the technology that we're all using has not been able to keep up. And so that's kind of starting to, in my opinion, erode the value of those shared systems. Because I want credit unions to survive. I mean, currently I'm at one. I think the mission is great, but in order to survive, you can't be limited just because the technology has only gotten to a certain point. And since everyone uses it, we all have to keep using it. Like, we won't be here. None of us will be here if we keep doing that. It does force, the smaller credit unions into a bad spot. But, I'm sure that it will catalyze change. But yeah. I think there is very much a collaboration element in credit unions. It's unique.
When you say that tech has lagged, especially when it comes to these systems that are shared, is that just the fate of shared infrastructure? I mean, I can think of a few other pieces of infrastructure in the financial services sector that are shared, but which are seen as cost centers, and none of the co-owners of the system, so to speak, really want to invest in it. There's, it's kind of like, it's not broken, let's not fix it. Is that true of any piece of shared infrastructure? Has anyone done it right?
I haven't seen anyone. I mean, gosh, I probably am biased here because I worked with Interact so closely when I was, with my companies, and they were a really big supporter. So, preface it with this, I'm going to be biased. But I do think companies like Interact, who are a shared system, are getting some things right. Like, they could sit and just continue to, provide a great, debit network that works, that, people love to use, but they're not. So I don't know. I know I'm going to get a lot of people going, oh, seriously, Sue, Interact? Like, there's lots of aspects of Interact that people love to hate. They're owned by the banks, and they're this and they're that. But they've got, if you look at their leadership, their leadership and their whole new strategy is all about technology innovation. So it remains to be seen what they'll be allowed to do because of their, bank ownership. But it's hard to find somebody because, I mean, at the end of the day, like we were at an offsite with our board this past week, and we used, and this is going to sound kind of hokey to those of your listeners who are super, tech savvy, but we use ChatGPT for a couple of our exercises. One of them we used to actually complete a value prop canvas for, a product for a certain segment for financial wellness. And honestly, it was pretty freaking amazing. But I think what it showed is this power of some of these new technologies, which nobody's really figured out the application for. It's coming so fast that, before you even got your idea validated in the market, you're already out of date. So, yeah.
So this might be a natural pivot back to innovation. That string I wanted to keep pulling on. There's a lot of talk about how to be innovative within organizations, within countries, but Canada is in the midst of a productivity emergency, to steal a term from a Bank of Canada official. So for all the talk of innovation, it's not clear we're any good at innovation in Canada. Do we know what we're doing here or not?
I'd probably have to say not yet. But I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer that question. Like, I still think that, I'm a bit of an anomaly inside my organization. And, I'm pretty passionate and I really do care. And that's what motivates me. There's really nothing else in it for me. Except that I have a lot of admiration for the CEO who asked me to do this. And now an amazing, group of colleagues and employees, but we're 1,000 people and I'm an anomaly, I think. So I think it's, I think Canadians in general have just grown complacent. So like our entrepreneurs and our innovation is still pushing rather than being pulled. And that you don't see that in other geographies. I mean, Europe, Asia, like you wouldn't think twice about trying something in those markets. Whereas here, the first thing is risk and then financial impact. And then, well, what would the regulators say? What are our competitors doing? Like, there's not a lot of leaders in Canada sort of, showing the way. Like, I look at companies like Wealthsimple and I think, wow, like how far have they come, from like 10 years ago? But there's how many of those? There's not a lot of those, right? So, the recent news about National Bank buying Canadian Western Bank, like, I think that's terrible. Like, it's terrible. I mean, it's not going in the right direction, and I don't know the reasons for that, merger. It's not a criticism of anybody other than, like, we don't need more bigger organizations. We need many, 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 many more smaller ones able to compete.
Yeah. So, at risk of oversimplifying the world, there's a range of explanations, but let's look at two of them. One is that there's a sort of cultural rot going on where Canadians are complacent and don't want to experiment with new things. But another is maybe the innovations just aren't up to snuff. Maybe they're not that good, and maybe that's why Canadians don't want them. How can we be so sure we're occupying one of those worlds or the other?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we don't live in a world that's like restricted by borders or physical boundaries anymore. Like, I'm not saying that Canadians aren't using their iPhones for everything now, right? That we're all, that trepidation we had about taking only your phone when you're going out to buy milk or to do whatever. Like we're using digital technology. But it's not ours. It's like Apple's and Amazon's, and and frankly, the most innovation in payments is happening outside of Canada. But we are using it. Banks are using it, right? PayPal's. I mean, I think they're in the midst of launching, a digital wallet. But it still is that it's controlled by these massive organizations who are, controlling our ability to use it. So I think we are, even in this past week I was in Prince George, British Columbia. And if you look at where Prince George is, first of all, it's the north. And it's about 100,000 people in the community. But, one of the questions I was asking is do people actually use digital technology out here? And the thing is that it's a huge mining, industry, a ton of forestry. But then there's also the people that live there are just like you and me. They want to make a living. So many of them own small businesses. Many of them still shop online. You've still got things, maybe you don't have Uber there, but you have a rideshare service and stuff. So it's that it isn't that Canadians are not wanting the innovation. They're just where it's prevalent is not in our financial services industry. It's outside of that. It's all the other stuff we use to get through our daily lives, I guess.
Why isn't it prevalent in the financial services industry?
Because I guess the business models aren't there as much as they are for in payments innovation. I don't even think the majority of financial institutions and their leadership truly understand how much money payments makes, right? And I'm probably, there's people laughing right now because sure, I think the executives inside of, the big banks understand that. And that's why they're wanting to, delay things like the real-time rail and stuff, because that will change the economics of payments for them. But, I think the business model is for sure one, traditionally, it's been, let's get your money, into our deposit accounts, our term products, whatever it is. And then when we have that money, then we can actually use it to lend out. And that's the business model. That's not the business model for pretty much any newer industry entrant that's providing a financial product, right? It's not the business model for Intuit. It's not the business model for Uber or for, and all of those organizations make so much money off of financial transactions that it's foolish not to look at them and think of them as competitors.
So innovation requires doing things differently from the way they've been done before. But so many financial services are regulated to be designed and distributed in these very, very particular ways. And I get the impression that that's going to be truer and truer of the entities that aren't currently regulated as financial institutions, just given the way the government's been going. So very intentionally, the rules of the game are being designed in such a way to lock in ways of doing things. And so I've heard it argued before that quake innovation or to some extent even incremental innovation is just not possible in financial services. And that's a deliberate policy choice by the federal government. True or false?
False. I think the implementation of the policies is why innovation doesn't happen, right? It's not, and I think those are, and I I know enough to be dangerous here with about, the BC regulator. I've never even met with them. And we have an awesome team that deals with them and understands, what they require. And actually I think we're seen very positively in the BC, in the BC regulator's eye. But there's the regulation, and then there's all of those many business rules that you use to show to your regulator that you're following it. And it's the interpretation of that I think has not gotten innovated. Like, we have, let's say, I don't know, 300, I'm making this up, 300 business rules in lending. Like, what I'm asking our team to do is look at those, like, let's look at all the requirements and understand for real if those are actual requirements or if those are things that maybe we put in place 10 years ago that don't make sense anymore, or that maybe there's a technology provider that can give us a source of data where we can automate it, right? And I don't know that, I guess I don't know, but I don't think that that's where innovation is being focused, right? Because it's much more on the user experience, the front end, the shiny stuff. But to your point though, sure. I mean, the perception is it's hard. Oh, we can't do that because of the regulators. And I'm just a believer that, I don't think that's what, in all the time I spent with Finance Canada, I don't think that's what they want. I think what they want is a healthy system that, is safe and secure and meets the needs of, its participants, not that there's rules, right? The rules have to be equivalent to the needs of the customers and still achieve the objective of being safe. But it's harder. I think it's harder now to do that, now that, you need to respond so quickly to market changes. So, yeah.
Who is the most innovative financial technology company in Canada right now? Or one of?
Cool. God.
Sorry for putting you on the spot like that.
Oh my God. Oh geez. It's terrible that I can't think of one. Okay, can I come back to you on that?
Let me ask it differently. Which companies impress you in their ability to experiment, iterate, innovate, always be on the cutting edge?
So, in fairness to anybody out there who maybe thinks I should have 18 answers to this, I've been so focused on, kind of understanding the credit union environment and building the team and stuff. I really haven't actually had a chance to meet with a ton of companies. And so most of my examples are going to be outside of that, from a Sue perspective. I just look at how quickly companies like Neo and Wealthsimple and, and Coho and others can change. I do think that EQ Bank is innovative, but I also understand their business more now. And I think, wow, it's not fast enough. Not that I want to encourage them to be faster because we certainly compete against them, but, it is still true that, I know Coho does product releases, every week, or is able to pivot super quick. So it is by far, I don't actually, unfortunately, see a ton of true tech companies getting there. We have a bunch of partners, which I won't name, that are, either US-based companies and the speed at which they can change is too slow for me.
Right. What's in the water at some of these places that you mentioned that are really innovative? Like what's true of the people who work there?
I guess they started with a clean sheet of paper, like they didn't have to take, an existing tech stack or, maybe an old mindset and solve the problem they're trying to solve. So they've been able to build it with, new thinking and like if you take an organization that is predominantly using more sort of work back schedule, waterfall project management, like it's really hard for people to go, you want me to work in a pod, like on an agile basis with 2-week sprints? Like how do I do that? So, and I think that's, probably now, I'm sure inside of Wealthsimple, I don't know how many employees they are, right? Like 1,000, maybe more. Yeah. I'm sure things are more difficult now than they were. I'm sure they probably would like to go back to those days when it could be like, 4 people in a room making a decision versus 25, senior leaders. But yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like they don't have that debt, whether it's mindset debt or technology debt or, even lack of curiosity to drive them forward.
Does innovation have an optimal firm size?
Well, I would say maybe an optimal set of conditions. Like, I feel like a politician because I'm not going to answer that the way you asked it. No, I think that it's true. Like there is this, I would say right now, like Beam isn't in an optimal spot to do innovation because we need to integrate technology systems. Like our customers need us to actually have one platform. And to do that, just like anything, there's a period of time where you have to lock shit down. So, that to me is like the death of innovation. But if you have, leadership and mindset and a willingness to try and build the plane while it's in the air. We actually showed this thing in a recent leadership offsite, and it was an old video, like good 20 years ago. And I think it was what was it? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Anyway, you can Google it, but it's on YouTube. It's a video of somebody building the plane while people are sitting in the seats. So like there's no windows and, the flight attendant is walking down the aisle with the tray with the drinks and someone's actually like bolting on, pieces of the airplane. And it's about flying the plane and, while you're building it. And we're doing that. And it's hard. So I think innovation is people talk about innovation like they talk about fintech. Like it's just so polarizing. Well, what's a fintech? Well, what's innovation? At the end of the day, it's just everyone needs to be thinking differently about how you're moving forward with your business and changing. And so, yeah.
Given how you've defined it there, from the outside looking in, what are some ways of telling whether a company has that or satisfies those conditions?
I think, first of all, look at the CEO and the executive team. Probably number one. If there isn't anybody there with some real lived experience inside of a, newer way of doing things, that's going to be a problem because I don't know. It's just hard to teach unless you've like my whole story at the beginning. Like I thought I knew what fintech was when I was running innovation at Finastra. And then I get outside and I'm like, it's so huge. So you kind of have to have some experience. I think experience is still a big driver. That'd be one. I mean, watching, watching people speak that are on that are, sort of representing the company and how they speak and whether they're risk averse and cautious and, even saying that that they know everything. I don't know. There's probably softer signs of whether or not a company is really truly got the potential to innovate than a specific, set of criteria. Yeah.
Where is fintech going in Canada? Paint us a bit of a picture.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's maturing. I think, the companies that have made it to this point are showing that it's possible to make it. So I think that, is a good thing. And I don't necessarily, I know I keep saying, well, it's simple, but you can't not have respect for them and what they've been able to accomplish regardless of how they got there. But there's a lot of smaller companies. You don't need to be a Wealthsimple to be successful, and viable. So, but I do think we're going to see a maturing. I'm a little bit nervous about, how many PSPs are going to have to register with Bank of Canada and how many of them are going to have to meet those requirements and how many may not. So I think it's going to stress some of the organizations who maybe, according to those, requirements aren't going to meet it, which means they can't continue to operate. Or maybe they consolidate or merge or whatever. But and I think the same thing's going to happen with accreditation with fintechs under open banking, right? Or with anybody that exists that needs data from, the banks in order to provide their service is going to have to go through a process to be able to continue to do that. So I think that'll just take out players that may not be the ones we all want to leave, but by and large, hopefully won't be those material ones that we're all kind of starting to become reliant upon. So I think it's gonna, but the problem is, and I'm again biased on this because of my 10 years as an entrepreneur, I had 3 companies that were incorporated, and so I understand the whole capital gains tax issue. That is brutal. Like, it's brutal for entrepreneurs to have to, everyone has their story, like not every fintech is funded by, venture capital. Many are funded by, revenue or funded by, friends and family or whatever. And there are points in that journey where, you are not collecting a paycheck, right? Like I sold my house, I'm like a 50-year-old, this was 8 years ago, but so I was 40 something and I had to sell my house after, getting to that stage in my life where I had the house in High Park and all that stuff. But so I think, to then go and say, well, this group of people should pay more tax is like, are you serious? Like, I employed 40 people, that means that those 40 people have jobs and are using, services in their communities. Like, I just think that unfortunately, the other issue is like people are leaving British Columbia because they can't afford it. It's like, where do you go to live, with all the economic stresses that people are having? I just think it's going to be harder to keep, building that engine in Canada if we don't do something different.
I wasn't going to ask about the capital gains tax, but since you mentioned it, I'll ask one question about it. It's true that any policy decision has distributional effects. There are always going to be winners and losers. The textbook economist case for the capital gains tax hike is that it makes the tax system more efficient and equitable. Why shouldn't that be enough to settle the debate?
Well, first of all, I think efficiency Like, help me understand that one, because I'm not sure I understand what that means. But the equitable piece of it, I think the thing is, like, I don't know that people are really truly understanding, like, especially when you get, the loudest voices are investors and, entrepreneurs that look like they've made out really well. But if you look at the 1 million to 2 million, if you actually include, the businesses that have like under 4 employees plus, the other million small businesses, you're about 2 million Canadians who have a form of capital gains funding their life, funding their kids' life, funding their business. Like, so you're not just impacting, the flashy fintech CEO. You're impacting doctors, lawyers, dentists, business owners, retail owners, merchants. Like, it's anybody that's really driving the economic growth from a business perspective is impacted, and some in a detrimental way, like won't be able to continue to operate.
Do you think the exemptions and the carve-outs the government announced along with the tax increase go far enough to mitigate some of the damages, or no?
No, not at all. Like, it'll just change behavior, right? Because it just won't be as attractive. I think it's just I don't know, but I'm not sure that I'm really, as they say, educated enough on the topic. So maybe I'm just, too limited in my knowledge, but no, I don't think so. I just don't think this is the way to do it. Like, I went on LinkedIn and, got snarky about BDC paying out, tens of millions of dollars of bonuses to executives. That's a Crown Corp, like, our government enjoys the return on that business, but I just fail to see how, and I don't know anyone at BDC, so this isn't about anybody personally, but how do executives of a government-funded organization deserve to be exempt from that very same argument? This doesn't make sense. So I think there's other areas they could have gone, but I also know that like, I'm a little less naive about the fact that, our government actually isn't all seeing, all knowing, right? Like, these people making these recommendations are probably people that have maybe a handful of years of experience in their space, not experience as an executive or as a bureaucrat, but likely are new to it. They just don't know. So you got to make the best decision you're given. And yeah.
Back to fintech. The big 5 banks are pretty dominant. We have a pretty concentrated financial sector, and it's stably concentrated. Why is it worth starting a company to either compete with big banks for market share, or to compete with service providers to banks for some chunk of change?
Because I think inevitably they won't be, big forever. I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball. I do feel like, 3 years, 5 years from now, things like AI will dramatically have changed our lives. And there will be a point where big isn't the only thing that keeps you in your spot, so I think now is actually, in many ways, probably a better time than ever, because, we never had the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, but when it spurred all this, activity, and all these startups, they weren't necessarily going into a space at a time when digital adoption was at its peak, or when, new business models were actually being proven, or everybody had an iPhone or whatever in their wallet. My AirPod keeps falling out. But and so now I think we're on the verge of a much faster pace change. And so now you're it's like timing is everything, right? If you invent something, but it's just too early, it doesn't mean that it's not needed, right? So now I think is a perfect time. I don't know about the big banks. I think it's going to take a lot more than just, coming out to compete with the banks. Like it's not going to change the fact that the big banks exist, but there's so much individual value you can provide to consumers and businesses that the banks just can't possibly get after. I think the trick is getting to market and having people know you exist, but the need is there. So, but I think the timing is way better now. And with service providers, oh man, we have, if this was a shout out to technology companies or like what they call them, fintechs or software companies or whatever, like Canada is like woefully lacking in technology solutions from providers that can really help companies with innovation. So that is a given. I think we need more of that.
Why should listeners move to Victoria?
Oh man, you haven't left me nearly enough time. So as an Ontario resident for most of my life, and now gone through my first winter, there was no winter. I had flowers blooming for the last 12 months. I'm looking out my window at the ocean. You can breathe here. It is, the thing about, like, I did love my time in Toronto, and I joke, I know every underground parking lot in the city of Toronto. In my space, I was always out and about, going to places, meeting people. Now that we're in this, sort of more remote type work, living someplace that is just about, sort of health and happiness is way more, way more, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to live longer. Who knows if I actually will, but I feel like I will.
There are no grizzlies on the island, are there? Or are there?
I don't know if I've seen any grizzlies. I mean, there's lots of wildlife, but, we don't all live in the forest, Alex.
But the forest is close, which, I mean, to me seems like
I could go on 50 different hikes where I might end up on top of a mountain, on a beach, or, looking at a waterfall, and I could be there in 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah. I'm very lucky. I know. But it's not that bad either. Like, it's not, I mean, we went from a condo in downtown Toronto to a house on the island. We're just outside of Victoria. I spent less money.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's feasible. You just have to be willing.
So I need to talk to my wife about a potential BC move. Sue, thank you for joining us. It was my pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you very much. This was my first time being a guest, so I got to say, thanks. It actually was, made my day. Thanks,
awesome.
Alex.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for joining us. If you're looking for more, visit us at fintechscanada.ca or follow us on LinkedIn. See you next time.